This is the final slide. We're back at the global equity portfolio structure, which we saw at the beginning, and these are our actual exposures of active, passive in US and non-US. And if you do the calculation all the way through, we'll come out with one active risk number of 29 basis points for the portfolio, which in this example that we've set would be well within the 50 basis point budget that was preset. This is a method that is intuitive because it compares one number of the portfolio to a preset budget number. It's a way for boards to provide governance in an intuitive way. A lot of sophisticated investors do use this, the sovereign wealth funds, other pension funds. And it's a topic that we'd like to further explore with the board in future items. So Scott Chan will be coming back with his benchmark education part 2, and he'll touch upon this active risk budget concept further. But for us today, that concludes the presentation. We're happy to take any questions.
I'll just jump in while you're finding people here. To tie it into that last slide, there are 9 benchmarks on that last slide. So it kind of gives you an example of how complex our world has gotten, because the active and the passive have different benchmarks than just the U.S. in some cases.
Good afternoon, Lynn.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks so much for the presentation. This was really interesting. So I'm just curious, so right now there's about 29 basis points of active risk in your portfolio. So say you had a budget that was a little bit higher than that, how would you want to change the types of investments of the mix? Have you thought about that yet, or?
It's not that we want to change the mix of investments. We think that it will provide us more flexibility with the types of investments, with the allocation to investments that we currently have, and potentially to review new investments. So right now I have 2 discrete buckets, US and non-US. There are global strategies that include US and non-US, but right now there's just not a place to put it. If we had just one risk budget, we could add those strategies, and then still it would stay within the budget. We'd have more flexibility in the types of strategies we could evaluate and potentially add.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Neil?
So just to respond to Chris's comment about there's a lot of benchmarks on this page, I'm just going to go to the extreme and say maybe what Joan and David are teeing up here is just to have one benchmark called global equity and give them a risk budget of 50 basis points and call it good. So you don't really have to even really deeply concern yourself with all those underlying pieces of the flow chart, as long as they operate within whatever parameter you give them. That's the idea. So you can you can be free of those benchmarks, but you are delegating and trusting the actions, to your staff on that.
Which is like the top 2 layers of the pyramid, right?
Yeah, right. So
exactly.
we go up just to those top 2 layers.
That's exactly it, and it's very elegant.
No one else is in the queue. This was the first education or discussion information on this item. The materials were well prepared. Video was already stated was excellent in terms of taking a concept and presenting in an alternative format for visual learners. So thank you for that. One of the key takeaways for me is that to move in this direction, as Neil just said, just potentially, you have the global equity and you have 50 basis points of active risk, would be the flexibility that it would provide our staff. And the initial impression or takeaway for me is that you believe, and I believe the consultants concur, that that additional flexibility potentially could be advantageous for the portfolio and the fund.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay,
to find
good.
better sources of return.
Good. Then I'm understanding the direction that we're trying to go in. And in this, very competitive environment that we live in, we have to find ways where we can increase our advantages, however slight they might be. So bring forth the next round of discussion on this, and look forward to learning more and potentially taking some action. Thank you very much. Neil. We're going to take this one other item here, Chris. This is the Corporate Governance Sustainable Investment and Stewardship
strategy item, and then we're going to take a little break. So this is slated for 15 minutes if we need 15. Again, this is information.
My name is on the agenda, but that's where it's going to stop because I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled, I have to tell you, and very pleased to introduce your new Director of Engagement, Corporate Governance, and all things ESG, Kirsty Jenkinson. So please, put your hands together, staff, for a welcome to Kirsty. She is, obviously, as we well know, stepping into huge shoes, and I think she is more than capable of taking on the task.
And she has a terrific team that she'll be working with.
Yes, she does. Take it away.
First time. There we go, I'm on. Perfect. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes, I think, first up to introduce myself a little bit, just a little bit about me, but then more importantly to discuss this agenda item, obviously, and give you a little précis in addition to what you've seen in Chris's memo. So a little bit about me. I've always had a fascination and a real respect for the financial markets, their scale, their efficiency, their global reach, and their ability, obviously, to create economic development, provide savings and retirements. And I've always had a passion to create positive change in the world. And to me, these have never been two mutually exclusive goals. So I spent a bit of time at the start of my career on the fixed income trading floor at Goldman Sachs in London, learning as much as I could about the financial markets. Then I worked at a firm in the UK that was really pioneering responsible investment around the start of the century. I moved to the US about 8 years ago to take a role at the World Resources Institute, WRI, which was slightly different. It was a non-profit world. It was a research and a think tank really focused on environment, particularly water, scarcity and climate change, as well as international development. And then most recently, I led the sustainable investment team of another pension and benefits fund based in Chicago. So it's suffice to say, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to join CalSTRS, not least as you all know. You've allowed me to escape minus 25 degrees today, so thanks for that. But big thank you to Scott, to Chris, to entrusting me with this role, and to my fellow investment directors for their welcome and for already starting to roast me on multiple topics, which no doubt will continue endlessly. Beyond what's obviously, very attractive climate here and the weather, I'm really grateful to have the chance to work with you all, serving all of our members. I have 4- and 5-year-old sons, and so you'll appreciate how much I'm really starting to marvel once again at the unbelievable skill and the patience and the kindness of teachers. So that really means a lot to me. Now, obviously, aside from this chance to introduce myself, I'm really here to present the agenda item and a brief discussion about why we're going to decide to change the name from corporate governance to sustainable investment and stewardship strategies. And I know it's not the most crisp name, but we really think it is the best name to encapsulate what we're aiming to do. But before I do anything else, I'd be really remiss in going any further without thanking Aisha Mastani, who's there, I hope, and Brian Rice, who many of you know have been leading the team for most of the past year, and who will continue. And they're going to continue to lead the strategy with me going forward. I also think it's really important for you to know that I'm learning as much as I possibly can from Daniel, from Doug, Eric, Gabe, Geraldine, Kathleen, Laurie, Mary, Phil, Sarah, and Travis, who make up the rest of our fantastic team. But a few brief thoughts about, which expand on the memo that you've already seen. Why is this appropriate? And why do we think it's timely for the name change? I'll start with sustainable investment. And I think it's best really explained by the original definition of sustainable development. This was introduced in a pretty seminal report that came out of the United Nations back in 1987. And it essentially says it's to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this term and definition is absolutely not new to CalSTRS and probably to all of you, but I've yet to find a more succinct sort of phrase that more perfectly aligns with the investment goals of the pension fund serving the educators of children. Now, stewardship is another term that is obviously very familiar to everyone here, as it's one of CalSTRS's core values, and it describes our intrinsic fiduciary duty. But the term is also increasingly used globally to describe the breadth of the activities for which CalSTRS is so well known. We're not dialing down our expertise in corporate governance. We just believe stewardship is a more accurate expression of the multiple ways in which we're able to use our voice as an investor to encourage companies to exhibit responsible business practices, including the management of environmental, social, and governance issues, or ESG issues as the acronym is. And stewardship also encompasses how we vote our proxies, how we influence market norms and behavior to focus on long-term value creation. And that really, as you've heard all this morning as well, it is absolutely our ultimate goal. Now, I obviously appreciate that a name change at best can just be semantics. What really matters is what the Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategy team actually does on a day-to-day basis. So if I had to try and sum up briefly a bold vision, 3 weeks into this role, so bear with me and give me some slack if it changes, it would be to transform the financial markets for the benefit of California's educators. As a long-term investor, I think CalSTRS has both an opportunity and a responsibility to help fix the challenges which are exacerbated by short-termism in investment mindsets and which essentially threaten to erode a truly sustainable global economy, which, as we all know, supports financial opportunity, social cohesion, and environmental health. I think my primary goal, obviously, over the following months is to clarify and communicate how our team is seeking to make this vision a reality. Our strategies will obviously build on our existing activity and successes, but we must be focused to maximize our impact and to leverage our resources efficiently. I see 3 key pillars for our work, which I hope will underpin our discussions in the March meeting and obviously on an ongoing basis. The first pillar is investment. We have to make really smart financial decisions that will help us reach our long-term risk-return goals and increase the flow of capital into truly sustainable businesses. Our world is obviously changing, and by the time that our youngest members retire, they're likely going to be living with 11 billion other people on a highly urbanized, technology-driven planet with more limited resources, natural resources, and a changed climate. These are going to present investment risks, but also enormous opportunities. So that's the first pillar, investment. The second pillar is stewardship, again, obviously reflected in the name. We can influence a more sustainable global economy and responsible business practices through our dialogues with companies and with policymakers. It takes time, as you know, and we need to be very selective about the issues we choose to focus our resources on. But our size, our reputation, and our international partners and relationships can, and they absolutely do, create positive and influence change. So that's the second pillar, stewardship. And the third pillar, I see it as engagement. We have a responsibility to listen and communicate clearly with you, our board, with our members, and with broader stakeholders, I know in the room today as well, about our priorities, our challenges, and also our successes. So I hope that gives you a little overview of where I sort of come into, obviously, a role which I'm extremely grateful, as I said, to take, and a great team behind me and with me. So I'm eager to hear your reflections and your questions and look forward to more discussions as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Very well said. Concise and clear. Look forward to working alongside you and with you.
Yeah.
Sharon?
Yeah, I just, Kirsty, welcome. We're glad you're here. And I think we're really excited for this day because I think we've all kind of seen how the term corporate governance has sort of expanded. And certainly as we go to places and talk with other trustees around the world, it clearly is broadening. And so I'm really excited to have, it's not just a name change, but to me it more cohesively captures the vision, I think, of where we're headed as a fund at CalSTRS in terms of this work. So I'm really excited. And I wondered if perhaps in a future meeting, it would be great to have, I know you mentioned all the names. It would be great to either, if we could meet the rest of the team, sometimes, directors bring in their teams. I know like Global Equity is huge, but, but maybe just to see who they are, or maybe have just a flow chart of the names of the staff that are under you, because I know there's been change. I think there's 15 folks now, right? But it'd be great to just have a little more sense of who those folks are, and excited about the next chapter.
Great.
Thanks, Sharon. So before we take a break, I don't see anyone else in the queue. Chris's, the memo essentially was looking for some feedback and guidance on
Brian.
on the name change, the proposed name change. Would come back to us, I assume, for some action, or unless there was some opposition to doing this or not, just change the name. Yeah, we're going to change the name, okay. So we'll change the name. But I do think what you did say was very important, and I think it's worth reinforcing. It's building upon the great work that this organization has done with people like Aisha Mastegi and Brian Rice, who are in the audience, Phil LaRue, and others. I've attended numerous conferences with Brian Rice across the globe. He's so well recognized and so articulate on environmental issues. Aisha on corporate governance matters at ICGN, CII, on the board. So we've got a great team, a great bench. We're looking to grow, and I think the committee is looking forward to some ideas. And I think for us to be able to clearly articulate what we believe, how we invest our capital, leverage the relationships and partnerships that we have to effectuate positive change, and the role that capital, large institutions like ours, and partnerships with other institutional investors across the globe can be agents of positive change without giving up returns. And the world is changing. So the risks of staying still and not changing, I think, far outweigh the risks of embracing those changes and looking for the opportunities that will be presented in the investment world, and looking to our experts, internally, externally, advisors, consultants, to help guide us to make sure that we have the right policies in place so that you can put the capital to work and we can forge partnerships with people that are in our roles so that we can continue the great work that has been done to date and then the next part of our journey on the highway. Brian, Bartow, you want to comment?
Those are great remarks. I wish you had let me pick my nit before you gave the, so the only thing I want to add is when we talk about changing the name, we have to look at changing the teacher's retirement law 22354, which is the continuous appropriation statute for corporate governance. It's called corporate governance.
Sure.
So you're going to want to work with Grant's group and try to revise that language in there. It doesn't just talk about the name, it talks about the activities. So you probably are going to want to float some legislation if you're going to expand the activities or change the scope of those activities. So it'd be nice if staff brought back that whole package for you to take a look at that, so you wouldn't have to do it in separate sections.
That's great.
Sorry I didn't squeeze that in there before.
No, it's
your
well
inspiring
received and
comments.
it's understood, and I would ask that Steve, your colleague, put that down as a information request, and we'll work with the team to make sure it's properly agendized for a future meeting so that all the Ts are crossed, the Is are dotted, we're doing what is appropriate, we're following the right process, and that we're not just, inadvertently not doing what we need to do. That's why you're there, Brian. Thank you so much.
I was going to add that my intent, because I knew we'd have to change state law if we went the full way, which would be great to do, but I know political capital is a scarce commodity. I think it's a lot about branding. So part of what I was going to do was, unless you objected, I was going to make the decision to change the branding image, keep it corporate governance within the state code language, so that all align. But I'm open to the other idea too. But I think we're seeing the industry move to stewardship as a common term globally. And so just trying to find a way to evolve. So we can go either way, but it's more from a branding perspective. I was going to approve changing the name unless you objected, and then we can work on the internal description language.
So, I don't see any opposition to the changing in the branding, and then there's the second component of it that has to be done with.
We'll float that as the right people's capital.
get that taken care of.
Attention. We'll just.
Work it through.
The right people.
The right people.
Brian, we'll make sure that it's done properly. Thank you very much. Karen,
I just wanted to I guess I'm not clear on what the new name is going to be, or what's the proposal of the new name that's in here, because I didn't know if group was part of that name, or is it just Sustainable Investment and Stewardship Strategies?
Exactly right.
And no group?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for.
thanks. Okay, seeing no one else, thank you, Kirsty. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
We'll take a break until 4 o'clock, and then we'll come back with the next item.
I'm gonna stop talking.
I just reread it, the whole thing.
Okay, item 10, the CalSTRS Collaborative Model, Private Equity Overview. This is Margot Worth, Director of Private Equity. Margot, I'll turn it over to you. And again, this is informational, and this is a continuation of our conversations around what a CalSTRS collaborative model could mean inside the private asset classes.
Thank you, Harry.
You're welcome, Margot.
So I'm here to present items 11 and 12. These are budgeted together for 35 minutes. I have prepared comments that are about 10 minutes, but I can go into as much depth as you want. I'm going to start out with the 3 takeaways. And I'm going to read from INV 151 that the 2 bullets, private equity is operating, CalSTRS private equity is operating in an industry of increasing sophistication and competition. With investment returns under pressure, institutional investors are increasingly turning that ties in with the earlier conversations on benchmark, I think. The next sentence, the lowest risk and easiest form of direct investing for private equity investors is co-investing. CalSTRS private equity has a well-established co-investment program, but its run rate investment pace is arguably undersized relative to the size of the overall program. The potential rewards for increasing the size of the program are significant. It's kind of buried in here, but the upshot is that in recent years, we've been putting out about 10% of our commitments in private equity in the form of co-investments. And over the next 2 to 5 years, we'd like to at least double it. So that's the takeaway from item 11. The takeaway from item 12 is the resources we need to do that. The private equity team is currently approximately 25 people, and we are planning or suggesting that the resources we would need to do a more intensive co-investment program would be an additional 15, going from roughly, I'm rounding, 25 to 40. That's the takeaway. I think it's described in the materials. I can now go into a little more detail.
I don't know if you actually necessarily need to, Margot. We spoke very briefly before the item. I think the reports are so straightforward in terms of what we're looking potentially to accomplish. The co-investments and the opportunities that co-investments may create for us, and the reduction in fees that we would pay. The need potentially for hire additional staff with skills, talents, et cetera, to do that. Almost potentially doubling the size of what the co-investments have been to date on an annual basis. The team would come back with flushed out ideas as to the staffing, et cetera. A question I do have and would be, how in the event that we were to take that next step as opposed to partnerships or another form of the collaborative model, but we, for lack of better terms, looked at the low-hanging fruit, stuff that we're already doing more of it at a larger scale with additional staff. How would there be changes in, or recommendations, and I would look to our folks from Makita, would you recommend that our oversight responsibilities, would there be a different reporting mechanism or
kind of what we're doing with the risk mitigation strategy. We're getting updates on to how those changes are, how it's performing.
The situation with the co-investments, I think, is somewhat different than risk mitigating strategies, but there are some parallels. So what's different is that they're already doing co-investments now. So this is something that's ongoing as opposed to risk mitigation being relatively new and de novo and getting started. One issue that I think does make sense is that there are a number of execution steps that are being outlined in the proposal here. So whether those are the ones that ultimately get decided on or not, but the point is that there will be some execution steps that are being included here. And I do think that those steps should be outlined very clearly, and that there ought to be a review by us and report by the staff and the consultant to the board about how these are being implemented, because it's co-investment makes a lot of sense for CalSTRS. They're doing it now. The others are doing it now. But you know, the issues around execution are ones that are important.
Terrific. I'm going to turn to Scott, because that came up in the prep call as well around execution risk and understanding what those risks potentially could be and how we might mitigate what those risks are. Scott?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit and maybe provide a roadmap of where we're headed. So we've been studying the implementation by the asset classes, private equity, real estate, and I believe corporate governance will be next. And we'll soon be wrapping it up in May. And during the study, we've been suggesting a lot of things that have been coming out of the study and what our peers do. But in May, we'll be drawing more of a framework in terms of what we're really wanting to recommend from CalSTRS perspective and wrapping it all together. And I think what you'll start to see as well is that this is a all of CalSTRS team initiative in the sense that we talked about investments and the complexity of that division moving forward. Well, there are other components. We talked about risk as an example, keeping up with it, a governance framework. A big part of the initiative will be human resources related. Can we recruit? Is the compensation correct? There's a number of those human resources initiatives. So we'll present in May, and it'll start to, the board will get an opportunity to understand more tangibly what that is. And then you'll look at your work plans for the fiscal year. And I think it'll make its way into work plans that might be in across different committees, if you will. So Chris and I really plan on presenting that vision in May, and it'll be more of a tangible form. It'll go from studying by the asset classes to hopefully something a lot more tangible and looking out 5-10 years in a vision and working backwards. What do we need to do?
Anyone else? I would think that there would be GPs that there won't be a shortage of GPs that would be interested in these types of co-investments in these, doing perhaps at a different scale.
Well, the issue is not GPs willing to do it. It's the fact that there's so many LPs that are having the same idea at the same time, right. And so it's going to make making the competition harder. And so, what you did 5 years ago will not put you competitively on a sound footing for what you need to be doing now or what you need to be doing in 5 years. And so, just as there's kind of a ladder of more direct type of co-investing, and I think it's primarily a partnership industry, and we do primarily partnership investing. But at the top of the pyramid is doing direct investing, buying companies directly, basically becoming a GP, and co-investing's in between. But within co-investing, there's 4 or 5 layers of co-investing, and so we are more advanced than most, and really the plan is everyone's trying to move up the ladder at the same time. And I think we have an advantage, and part of the strategy is to just keep advancing. Others are more advanced, typically the Canadian sovereign wealth funds and the global sovereign wealth funds in Asia and the Middle East. We're pretty advanced for a U.S. public pension plan, but if we want to keep our competitive advantage, we need to benchmark and look at what these other global funds are doing. And so when you get down into the details, it's do more co-investing, do more of what we're already doing, but also do more advanced types of co-investing. Because I don't know if I
Yeah, no, it was good, helpful. Paul?
And Margot, does that mean increasing the number and skill set of the staff? I mean, how do we get there? There was a discussion of that in the presentation.
So we have what would be, for most people, a very enviable large program. We have done, over the last 20 years, 80 co-invest. We've put out $3.5 billion. We've gotten $3.5 billion back, and we're holding a portfolio worth about $1.5 billion. So we are not novices at co-investing, and we are not new to the game by any means. But relative to our size, we're leaving a lot on the table. So if we want to go from 10 to 20% co-invest, what we would plan to do is twofold. One is cross-train the co-investment expertise resides in half of our team. So we have 8 senior people, 4 of them are experienced in co-invest. So what we want to do is cross-train the other 4 and then also bring in other experienced people. So it's basically extending what we already have, scaling up.
25 to 40.
Yeah.
So it's competition for deals because other funds are wanting to do the same thing, but it's also competition for people to add to our staff.
It is. I mean,
okay, thank you.
The going from 25 to 40, again, if you're looking at U.S. public pension plans, Texas would come to mind, and I think, you would see something similar, or even more aggressive in Texas. So this conversation is happening all around the world now with the top, all the funds, but all of the bigger funds, the top 20 or 40 funds in the world are hearing the same thing you're hearing and planning to do stuff that's similar. I don't know if all, but I think it's a general trend.
I think the INV 152, the related references to co-investment for performance studies, although I haven't read each one of those reports, the ones that they are helpful to have that. I think that was really insightful to put those documents there for us to be able to get our heads around this.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I would ask though, and I'm sure you're thinking about this, as we've had this conversation on a 2-year work plan on the CalSTRS collaborative model and what it potentially could be and why we may want to do this. And then we'll have a work plan for next year. Maybe it will be China, maybe it will be climate, who knows what we'll choose as a group. Mm-hmm. But for the last 2 years, we've been talking about CalSTRS collaborative model. And now we're talking about execution risks in the event that we actually take action upon this. For my comfort level, my hope is, and I'm sure the staff is thinking about this with the consultants as well, that the final analysis will show that there's a conviction that making a decision such as this, hiring additional staff, et cetera, there's a cost associated with that. But at the end of the day, the benefits will outweigh the cost of bringing in new people with different talents. I'm personally going to need a real strong level of conviction that we're making, if we were to make these decisions and act upon them, there's a level of conviction that the cost of doing this, it's worth it.
So if you just looked at the costs, I mean, the cost report came out and you saw numbers on the carried interest, and that's where the large part of that would be.
Yep.
There's a couple of aspects of that. So that's the the cost benefit side of things. What needs to happen is that the portfolio of co-investments has to perform at least as well on a gross basis as the regular fund investments. So that there's a number of things and thinking about that and being able to execute well in that with those constraints to make, because otherwise, if you just save on the carried interest, but the assets don't perform well, you've got a difficulty. The other thing is that not only investment in the people, but just from a portfolio construction perspective, you don't want to make the decision lightly. You don't want to just say on and off and just brakes and gas. You want to do it in a consistent way because there's going to be some dispersion of returns because it's going to be a more concentrated portfolio than just funds. So it's something that should be taken with the thought that this is going to be in place for a while.
Good. Thanks, Steve. I don't see anyone else in the queue. Margot, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Neil? Okay. I think we're up to Paul. Paul Shantic? Come on up, Paul.
Where's his jacket? Where's Neil's jacket? That's what I
Sporting a new look. This is carried over from November. Paul?
Yeah, carried
See ya.
over from the November 7th
Thanks.
meeting. Oh, there it is. How do I raise my seat? Oh, there it is. For the inflation-sensitive unit, this is essentially the kind of the big picture implementation of what we're talking about. And with that, I thought I would review just a little bit about, we talked a lot about it. I like to think we're all kind of on the same page. But the collaborative model definition really focuses on social capital of the organization. And that's what we talked about, people, bodies that can go out there and communicate. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking a lot, more than we have in the past, to a lot of different groups of people in terms of either co-investment, accounts, and things like that. So part of that social capital is clients, colleagues, friends, and peers. Those networks are structural. Folks that you run into at conferences, management, investment advisors, consultants, all those people. It's also relational. In other words, there's a lot of folks with information out there. And what we try to create from that is a mosaic of the investment story. And so those kinds of ties will increase over time. And of course, the best part, cognitive for us here, is we increase our knowledge on staff, the board increases its knowledge, and there's a sharing and trust that goes on between all the parties. That's the idea of this collaborative model that we're trying to build here. The idea then, from that, fees go down, engagement increases, manager oversight increases, and staffing increases. So when we put together the plans that I have and that Margot has here, we focused specifically on what do we think our staffing levels would look like in over the next few years. So I came up with in mind 6 to 12 people, but it's one of those things where Harry made a good point. We're going to sit down. We're going to go over this with the CIO and DCIO and really refine these and figure out how to do that in a way that gets us the talent that we want and moves us along. So in other words, the collaborative model, we've talked about it for 2 years. We're going to be implementing it behind the scenes when you go on to the next item to focus on over the next few years. That's always going to be in the background. So that's how, in terms of the collaborative model moving forward, how I think we're all thinking about this. And so with that, I don't have any analogies of cruise ships, oil tankers, orchestras, plates, houses, pyramids. Which one? Is it home building? I don't have any sports analogy. I don't think we used any of those today.
No. Driveway.
So with that, if you have any questions of me in terms of kind of how inflation sensitive approaches this, at my next at a glance, I do have an analogy using a stool, but it's kind of a modern art piece. One of the legs is fatter than all the other ones, so you probably wouldn't want to sit on it. You would just look at it. So anyway, with that, if there's any questions, I'm
Paul,
prepared.
thanks for the humor at the end of the day. Really was helpful. put some energy back in the room. Karen?
Well, I appreciate you explaining all what the social issues are. But you talk about commercial. Is that like you're going out promoting it? I'm not sure what you mean by commercial manner.
For
When you
us,
talk-
the commercial manner is doing the analysis quick, being able to get back to the other side to express our interest, and making our decisions in a commercial, quick, thoughtful manner. Because the worst thing you can do to the other side is go, well, it sounds kind of interesting. Well, you've got 15 days to get your diligence done. We don't have enough time. But you might be interested in the asset. That's what we don't want to do. We want to be able to say, this asset is interesting. It would fit well in our portfolio. Let's start the clocks. Let's go. Let's get our consultants lined up. Let's go through the diligence. That's the kind of commercial that we're talking about. And you want to be seen as that trusted partner that has executed on a number of transactions so that the marketplace knows that you're open for business and that you can execute and get the deal done. And that's the hardest part. That kind of goes back to the idea of having enough people with the talents that you can get what we call a SIM and say, here, look at this. See if this asset makes sense in our portfolio, which triggers a lot of work. And so that's the idea. You want to be seen as someone that is commercial, that can get something done, that can close the transaction if you're interested in it.
Okay, so being able to advertise that sale or that deal going through, basically, or?
Being able to get it done,
Make sure
yes.
it gets
Yeah, you
done,
don't need to
yeah.
advertise.
It's a term of art that roughly means you're acting less like a bureaucratic public institution and more like a for-profit entity.
Correct. It's the best way to think about it.
Not what we think of as commercial.
Right,
It's
like
a
commercial,
private side
okay.
financial term.
Is that
I
it,
wasn't
Karen?
sure, that's why I asked, thank you.
Yeah.
Great question.
All right, Paul, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks. Steve, any information requests?
I did, Mr. Chair. I have two. First one's on item 3, which was a request for information with respect to the ratios of active versus retired members for 1983 to the present, as well as the funded status, and to juxtapose that with the asset allocation chart that was brought up.
Yeah, and that could just be sent to us, I think, electronically. I don't expect that to be on an agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the, on item 10 was request to have an item brought back with any necessary legislation or other action items that might surround the change of the corporate government's name change and scope change.
Good, thank you. Did we miss anything else? No, right? Okay. Good, thank you.
So I think we are at the draft agenda for March of 2019. Scott or Chris, you want to take a peek at that with us and want to highlight
I would like to
anything?
jump through. Under the investment policies, I want to, with your permission, add the investment policy and management plan. We need to shift the asset allocation one notch as we've been changing in the markets. So that would be straightforward. You did have 4 firms respond to the general consultant RFP. So we may have 4, or we may have 3 interviews. Question on timing, because obviously the public announcement about 2 of your competitors potentially merging. Those generally do take 55 minutes. It's up to you about whether you want to do them in this room, or sometimes you've done interviews up in the mezzanine level. It's kind of up to you. I do need to add the semi-annual performance reports. Originally, we had those on there for May, but that's awfully stale to look at December 31 numbers. So if it's all right with you, the December 31 reports are much quicker and shorter than the big June 30 semi-annual performance reports, because it's only halfway through the fiscal year. That would be 3 items in public and then 4 in private. And then one last is to add the corporate governance, or what we'll now refer to, Karen, is SIS, S-I-S-S. We'll come back. I know we've talked about different, how to add stuff to that, but SIS would come back with their collaborative model, but which would be a fairly short item, so it wouldn't You know, we really are going to be cognizant of time, and I'll come back with better time estimates to streamline this agenda. We knew March was going to be a full day, and I talked to Jack and Cassandra about coordinating that because it's going to take all day. Interviews are always long.
Okay, thanks. We have members of the public who would like to speak to us. Items that are not on the agenda, we will not engage in conversation or dialogue on items which are not on the agenda. I would like to bring to the attention of the committee, I received a communication, a letter from representatives of Unite Here, which I forwarded to our staff for them to review and to act upon if appropriate after reviewing with legal counsel. So I don't know if other members of the committee received it as well, but it's been forwarded to our appropriate staff for their review. Samir, there you go. Okay.
Okay, Samir Santi, Unite Here, Local 11. Thanks to members of the board again and staff, as always, for giving us the opportunity to speak here today and for all the attention you've given to this matter. I want to update you on the situation at two hotels, the Irvine Marriott and the Pullman San Francisco Bay, both of which, as you know, are owned by CBRE, Global Investors Strategic Partners Fund 7, of which CalSTRS is a limited partner. On January 8th, workers at the CBRE-owned Irvine Marriott Hotel voted more than 2-1 in a National Labor Relations Board election to unionize with Unite Here Local 11. More than 110 workers will now demand that the hotel commence bargaining on their first union contract. The workers, we want to be clear, achieved this outcome in spite of an aggressive anti-union campaign waged by CBRE's hotel management company, Marriott. The company's tactics prompted the union to file multiple unfair labor practice charges with the NLRB concerning the company's anti-union campaign, alleging instances of interrogation, threats, and other alleged interference with workers' rights under federal labor law. A regional office of the NLRB is currently investigating these charges. Meanwhile, you've heard from workers at the Pullman San Francisco Bay Hotel on multiple occasions. Workers at that hotel continue to request a labor peace agreement from Pullman operator HEI that ensures that they can enjoy a fair, neutral process for deciding whether or not to form a union. Our experience, and this is an important point, our experience with the anti-union campaign by CBRE's manager at the Irvine Marriott only reinforces our conviction that Pullman workers need a substantive commitment of neutrality from the owner and operator of their hotel. The Pullman's general manager recently, and this is maybe news to some on the board, informed several workers this week that the sale of the hotel has been postponed, which we consider welcome news for Pullman workers who were concerned about the effect the sale might have on their job security. The common denominator, and again, this is important, I guess all of this is important, the common denominator at the Irvine Marriott and the Pullman San Francisco Bay is CBRE. We understand that CalSTRS has felt constrained in its ability to engage CBRE in a way that would bring both of these disputes to a resolution. This much was communicated to us in a letter from CalSTRS on December 21st, 2018. At the same time, we believe, and I trust most of the board would agree, that these disputes fly in the face of CalSTRS' ESG policy. If it is in fact the case that CalSTRS is unable to mitigate these social and human impacts, then we believe it is time for the fund to reevaluate its relationship with CBRE. As Chair Keeley noted, we've circulated a draft letter which to this fund and to all other limited partners in Fund 7, urging them to send it to CBRE. However, if such engagement continues to prove fruitless, we can only conclude that the CBRE relationship is not working for the fund, for its beneficiaries, or for its stakeholders. I'm going to pass it on now to a few workers from the Irvine Marriott who are going to talk about their experience, and then a couple from the Pullman who are going to talk about theirs. Thanks again, as always.
Mi nombre es Vicky Juárez.
My name is Vicky Juarez.
Trabajo en el Irvine Marriott
I work in the Irvine Marriott
por 16 años en banquetes.
for 16 years in banquets.
Esta es mi segunda vez que vengo a hablar aquí con ustedes.
This is the second time I've come here to speak with you.
La primera vez estuve aquí y hablé en público sobre el abuso sexual que sufrí en el trabajo.
The first time I was here was the first time I spoke in public about the sexual abuse that I suffered at work.
Hoy estoy regresando como parte de un grupo de empleados del hotel que han decidido hablar sobre el acoso sexual y el abuso en el Irvine Marriott.
I've returned as part of a group of workers from the hotel who've decided to speak publicly about sexual abuse at the Irvine Marriott.
Gloria García, Liliana Rodríguez y Leticia Vallejo no pudieron estar presentes hoy.
Gloria Garcia, Liliana Rodriguez, and Leticia Vallejo could not be here today.
Hoy hablo por ellas y por mis compañeros de trabajo en el hotel y por muchas otras mujeres y hombres en la industria hotelera que no están listos para hablar.
Today I speak for them and for my coworkers at the hotel and for many other workers who are not able in the hotel industry who are not able to speak.
3 días atrás, Bloomberg News, LA Times y otros periódicos reportaron nuestra historia.
3 days ago, Bloomberg News, the LA Times, and other newspapers reported our story.
Las 4 de nosotros reportamos el acoso y abuso sexual. La gerencia hizo poco o nada para protegernos del abuso.
4 of us reported the abuse and sexual harassment. Management did little or nothing to protect us.
En mi caso, la gerencia realmente me disciplinó sin paga.
In my case, management disciplined me without pay.
Después de eso, nos mantuvimos en silencio durante demasiado tiempo y pensamos que a nadie le importaba.
After that, we were silent for some time. We felt that no one cared.
Que estábamos solos y que era solo parte del trabajo, que podrían despedirnos.
We felt alone. We thought this is just part of the work. We thought we could be fired.
Y que era nuestra culpa.
We thought it was our fault.
Y todos somos inmigrantes y nos preocupa que puedan perjudicar nuestras posibilidades de estar en este país.
We're all immigrants, and we were afraid if we spoke out, it could prejudice our chances to remain in the country.
Estoy aquí para decirles hoy que ya no tengo miedo y decidimos organizar la unión.
I'm here today to say that I'm no longer afraid. We decided to organize a union.
Nos conocimos y compartimos nuestras historias.
We got to know each other and we started to share our stories.
Nos dimos cuenta que estábamos sufriendo los mismos problemas.
We realized we were suffering the same problems.
Decidimos apoyarnos unos a la otra y luchar por nuestro derecho.
We decided to support each other and to fight for our rights.
La última vez que estuve aquí les dije que quería la unión y para tener una voz sobre cómo la gerencia trata con los acoso sexual.
The last time I was here, I said that I wanted to have a union so I could have a voice in how sexual harassment was dealt with at my hotel.
Estoy orgullosamente que el 8 de enero ganamos y vamos a seguir la lucha.
I'm proud to say that on January 8th we won, and now we're ready to continue our fight.
Ahora que ganamos, estamos trabajando unidos para que eso suceda.
Now that we've won, we're continuing to work to achieve our goals.
En nuestro primer contrato exigimos botones de pánico.
In our first contract, we are demanding so-called panic buttons.
El derecho a cerrar los baños públicos mientras los limpiamos.
The right to shut the public bathrooms while they're being cleaned.
Expulsar a los huéspedes que son acosadores sexuales y otras protecciones.
To kick abusive customers out of the hotel and other protections.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Mi nombre es Laura Pacheco. Tengo 11 años trabajando de recamarera en el Hotel Irvine Marriott.
My name's Laura Pacheco. I have 11 years working as a housekeeper in the Irvine Marriott.
Yo me incorporé en el comité para organizar la unión porque yo estaba cansada de limpiar de 15 a 17 cuartos diarios.
I joined the union organizing committee because I was tired of cleaning 15 to 17 rooms a day.
Cansada de que me robaran mis propinas, cansada de comidas viejas que los clientes ya pagaron.
I was tired of having my tips stolen. I was tired of eating old food that had been sold to the customers and was then being sold back to us for our lunches.
Y nos las venden a nosotros. Yo quería trabajar en un lugar libre donde yo tendría respeto y una voz.
I wanted to work in a place that was free, where I could have respect and a voice.
Sabíamos que una elección a la unión no sería democrático, pero somos fuertes y discutimos y decidimos hacerlo.
We know that a union election is not democratic, but we were strong. We talked it over and decided to do it.
Al día siguiente que archivamos nuestra petición para la elección, la gerencia empezó sus juntas ante unión.
The day after we filed our petition for a union election, management started their anti-union campaign.
Llegó un señor de la corporación, él habló de los organizadores de la unión, cómo eran criminales.
The corporate person showed up at the hotel. He started telling us that the union organizers were criminals.
Él trató de asustarnos para que no habláramos con ellos.
Tried to scare us so that we wouldn't talk to them.
Nos dijo que los organizadores, si llegaban a nuestras casas, no los dejáramos pasar, que llamáramos a la policía.
He said if the union organizers came to our house, we should not let them in and we should call the police.
Después, Elvi y Mario vino por primera vez al hotel y trató de convencernos de votar no a la unión, tratándonos de hacernos sentir que éramos parte de su familia y al mismo tiempo ignoró nuestras quejas.
Then David Marriott came to our hotel for the first time. He tried to convince us to vote no for the union. He tried to make us feel that we were part of his family, but at the same time, he ignored our complaints.
Cuando David y Mario se fue, trajeron a 5 o 6 personas diarias de la corporación. Esta gente trató de dividirnos. De cada día, de 3 a 4 de ellos nos buscaban en los pisos donde trabajábamos, interrumpiéndonos en nuestro trabajo.
When David Marriott left, they brought in 5 or 6 corporate union busters daily. These people tried to divide us. Every day, 3 to 4 of them would look for us on the floors while we were working. They would interrupt our work and lie to us about the union.
Nos dijo que la unión solo quiere nuestro dinero.
They said the union just wanted our money.
Amenazaron con que podemos perder beneficios si votamos a la unión sí.
They told us we would lose benefits if we voted yes for the
La
union.
presión es grande. Vino el manager general. Ella nos buscaba mientras nosotros trabajábamos solos en los pisos.
The biggest pressure came from my general manager. She would look for me on the floors while I was working alone.
Ella lloraba cada vez que hablaba conmigo y mis compañeras.
She would cry every time she spoke to me and my coworkers.
Yo sentí que como ella que estaba tratando de manipular nuestras emociones, hacernos sentir culpables por apoyar la unión.
Felt like she was trying to manipulate us emotionally, make us feel guilty for supporting the union.
Esta fue una presión grande. Nos pusieron en una silla de madera en los baños, silla que la cual no podemos usar porque nunca tenemos tiempo para bajar por el exceso de trabajo.
This was a lot of pressure. They did put a massage chair in the bathrooms, but unfortunately, we are never able to use it because of the excessive work.
Por fin no nos podían sentir intimidados y ganamos la unión 2 por 1. Pero yo estoy aquí no por eso, sino porque quiero que ningún trabajador sufra este proceso tan antidemocrático.
At last, we won, despite they could not manipulate us or intimidate us. We won the union more than 2 to 1. But I'm here today because I don't want any other worker to have to suffer in this process so undemocratic, simply to enforce their rights.
Simplemente para esforzarnos sus derechos, porque no digan ustedes, señores del CBR, que tienen que dejarnos que los empleados en paz cuando quieran sindicalizarse.
Why don't you tell CBRE that they should leave employees alone in peace when they decide to unionize?
Martha Samayoa? Samayor.
Yes.
Martha Samayor.
Yes.
And then Jennifer Montufar? Okay.